USC. I am Anishinaabe or Ojibwa from the Keweenaw Indian community in Michigan. I am a senior, but graduating a little early, so this is my last semester. I am on the pre-law track with a film minor, and yes. Oh, I'm also a conference assistant for this conference, which has been great.
Daniel Williams inishia nanast ejitachi inishla bipatodni bashashin todachitni dashache bilagana dashanala. Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Williams and I am the newly appointed co-director of NASA. I am majoring in psychology with an emphasis in pre-dental. Oh, I am Navajo from the Four Corners region.
Hi everyone, my name is Najoni McDonough. I'm also Navajo and I'm a sophomore here at USC. I am the Director of Public Relations at NASA currently. I study law, history, and culture with a minor in dance and law and social justice.
Okay, so I think we're going to start by giving our mission statement of NASA. The Native American Student Assembly is a nonprofit umbrella group for Native American, American Indian student organizations here at USC. NASA is one of 9 cultural assemblies under USC's undergrad student government. As the only Native American programming entity on campus, our mission is to voice the concerns and needs of Native American student body at USC, as well as provide Native American, American Indian, and non-Native students the opportunity to connect and empower one another through various types of events that facilitate the academic, pre-professional, cultural, social, and political self-realization of the University of Southern California's Native students as individuals and as a student community. That was a lot.
Yeah, so in the past year, NASA has been involved in quite a lot on campus. It was actually our first full year as a recognized assembly. So we participated in the building renaming here at USC, which was for the Dr. Joseph Medicine Crow Center of Public Affairs, which was an amazing opportunity to be part of that. The Student Equity and Inclusion Program here at USC also graciously gave us a lounge that's called the Native American Pacifica Lounge. It's kind of our safe space on campus. And one of the members here, Jer Peltier, he is the graduate ambassador for that lounge, which is great. So yes, and we have also just been putting on like small programs and events for Native and Indigenous students on campus, as well as anyone who is willing to come and learn about Native issues and just what it's like to be a Native on campus. So this year so far, that has included a career workshop where we were able to assist Native students in building their resume and talk about interview tips. We also just have small fun events for all the Native students here. And we just restarted our beading circles. So that started last year, and we're happy that that is happening again in our beautiful lounge. So a couple of our members who actively bead kind of lead everyone who's wanting to learn about Native artistry and making their own stuff. So yeah, that's just some of the things that we've been involved in, but there's obviously so much more to be done. And although we don't, think that all of the pressure should be on us to be putting these things forward. We're still very happy to help and advocate for these things that Native students in specific really need on campus.
So in terms of future events, we have some things we are working on. Right now, one of the things we are working on is advocating for Native languages to be taught and be accepted as a language requirement here at USC in the undergraduate student government. Yeah. We're continuing to have events with our Native community, and we plan to do more outreach in the community here. We might have an event coming up, going to an elementary school to teach their kids about Native Americans in our history. So that's very exciting. Okay. One more thing. Advocating for more coursework here at USC, more Native American classes. Yeah, that is definitely lacking, so we are working on that.
Yeah, and just with that and with the topic that the conference is going to be covering throughout the week until Wednesday, that is a history and also an ongoing reality that we wish to be taught more, and we wish for non-Native peoples to at least be aware of, because many people are not aware of the struggles that we have had to go through, and that goes for all Indigenous people around the world. As we're going to see throughout the conference, Aboriginal Australians, there's a lot of overlap between that and Native Americans. Same with Indigenous Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, or indigenous people from Central or South America too. So yeah, and these issues are obviously still affecting us a lot today, even though us Natives are very resilient and we've been through a lot. There are still some things that we just cannot ignore and that need to be covered more often. So with that, on behalf of NASA as a co-sponsor for this event, we are just so grateful for the opportunity that the Center of Advanced Genocide Research has given us, and to Wolf and Martha and also Maya, who've just been great in really tying us all in to everything. We just want to thank you, and we're very excited for the conference to come. We'll all be kind of in and out at different times for presentations, but yeah, and we really hope to connect with a lot of y'all from different nations and different backgrounds. So thank you so much.
Bonjour, Maigan Gijikandishnakaz, Maigan and Rudem. My name is Lorena Fontaine. I'm one of the co-organizers for this conference. I'm Korean Anishinaabe. I'm a member of the Saugeen First Nation. My territory is up in Canada. And I'm so grateful that we're all here. Because it's been a couple of years that we've had to postpone this conference because of the pandemic. But it was so important for us to be together here in person, rather than, I think all of us are tired about virtual events. We're sick of Zoom. But it's really important for this particular conference that we make personal connections with each other, and we simply can't do that online. So I'm so grateful that we're here together in person, and I'm looking forward to getting to know to getting to know you over the next few days. I've had some already amazing conversations with individuals that I hope to go and visit at some point. And I just want to thank the Native American Students Association for being here. It was really important that we open up the conference with student voice. They're our future, and the work that we do in our communities and our scholarship and our universities and our advocacy work are really for them, right? The work that we do is to ensure that the youth and the next generation know this history, and hopefully that their lives are a little bit easier than some of us have experienced. So I was grateful that we were able to connect with the students and have them open up the conference. The other important thing for us is to hear from the elders, which is what we're going to be doing next. So we're going to transition now into the hearing from the elders this evening. And we have one special video that we are going to play because one of the elders that we invited was not able to come due to health reasons, but he really wanted to have a voice here at the conference. So I'm going to invite Druitt to come up to introduce this elder, a Mi'kmaq elder from Canada, and also the video that we're going to share with you. After that, I'm going to invite the elders that are going to be speaking with us this evening. Miigwech.
Hello, it's wonderful to be here. I'm Dorota from Canada, and I'm here to bring in the voice of Daniel Paul, who is a Mi'kmaq elder and knowledge holder. And as Lorena said, he is not well, so he couldn't be here with us today. But in preparation for this conference, when we found out he'd be unable to come, we recorded an interview. We did that in July. And it was a real privilege to be able to do that. So Daniel Paul will be speaking to us from Chibuktuk or Halifax, which is in Mi'kmaq, and that's an ancestral, unceded, and unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq. And that territory is covered by treaties of peace and friendship. And those treaties were signed between the British Crown and the Mi'kmaq, Wasauksing, and Passamaquoddy for the first time in 1725. And all of us who live in Mi'kmaq, including settler populations like myself, are obligated by those treaties. Daniel Paul's biography can be found in your folders. So I would just say a few things. This is the fourth edition of Daniel's "We Were Not the Savages," and the emphasis is on the first word, as he always says. So we launched the fourth edition just 2 weeks ago, and I put out some flyers for you if you'd like to have a look and perhaps purchase the book of like a really, really rich and illustrious life that Daniel Paul, or Danny as we know him, has lived. I will just mention that he was the founder of the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq, and then an executive director of that confederacy for many years. He has been for decades a human rights activist, and he was really taking the government of Nova Scotia and the government of Canada to task to make sure that these rights have indeed been observed. He has received numerous awards. He has a dozen honorary doctorates. He is the recipient of the Order of Canada, the recipient of the Order of Nova Scotia. And I have known and learned from Daniel Paul for almost 15 years now. And I'm very grateful for that privilege. So it was just such an honor to do this interview with him. It was supposed to be a 15-minute interview. It's a 2-hour interview, but do not worry. We excerpted it for you, but we can make the entire 2-hour interview available. I know that Daniel Paul really wanted to be here with you, so I am bringing Daniel Paul into this room. Maybe I will.
Well, thank you very much, and I would like to thank the organizers of the conference for allowing me to do this by video. I would much prefer to have been in California with you all and doing it live, but due to health reasons, it's not possible at this point in time to consider such a thing. So instead, we'll do what's second best and do an interview. And I would like to start by talking about the title of my book, We Were Not the Savages, and the reason for it was, Europeans began to invade the Americas in 1492, and the Pope, way back, issued a bull, what they called a bull at the time, and it was that doctrine of discovery, where it was declared that people that were non-Christian could not own property, and thus their property was up for grabs. And this was used as rationale for Europeans to go abroad and rape the civilizations of the non-European world, which they did with gusto. In the Americas, 2 continents, North and South America, were raped from one tip to the other. Civilizations that had existed for thousands of years were completely destroyed. Properties were stolen, and in the process, millions of people died. And over the colonization period, I would estimate that probably you're looking at maybe 50, 60 million initially, and then over a long period of time, the centuries, probably you're looking at 200 or 300 million people that were slaughtered one way or the other. And you look at history and you see in cities across Canada and the United States where people like Christopher Columbus are honored with statues and cities named after them, streets and so forth and so on. Here in Nova Scotia, Mi'kmaq, we had Cornwallis, British governor, colonial governor of the province at that point in time. And he issued a scalp proclamation with the intent to cleanse Peninsula Nova Scotia of all the Mi'kmaq. That included men, women, and children. Prior to that, in 1744, Governor William Shirley of Mass Bay Colony, Massachusetts, he issued a declared war upon the Mi'kmaq and the Maliseet, and in that proclamation of war, he put a bounty on the scalps of the Mi'kmaq and the Maliseet, and that included women and children. And these things have not been talked about until I came along in this neck of the woods, and I said, when I initially thought of writing We Were Not the Savages, my thoughts were doing it from oral history. And then I said to myself, if I go with oral history, it's going to be declared BS. So I thought about it, and then I decided on a different course. Why not use their history, which is not talked about? Okay, so we began to research the archives and came up with all the different bounty hunters and the minutes of colonial meetings and so forth and so on. When you're looking at the overall picture, it's something that I would suggest to all Indigenous people around the world. Write your histories, but use the documents left behind by the colonizers, and you'll find them very effective. Okay. getting back to centralization, it's turned out to be a horrifying experience, let's put it that way, in the sense that people were moved from settlements around off reserve settlements like land. There was lands in Elmsdale, there were Mi'kmaq settlements, and children were taken away from families and put in the residential school and told they either moved to Shubenacadie or Eskasoni, and then they would get their children back. And we had no recourse at that point in time. When I was born in 1938, for instance, we were considered wards of the Crown and had the same legal status as drunks and insane people. So really, we had no way to turn to. And if you protested too much, you were branded a troublemaker, and you could wind up in jail for disturbing the peace. And it happened quite often, more often than people would like to think. And centralization was something where was supposed to bring assimilation of our people and help with the total extermination of the Mi'kmaq and the Maliseet. And it backfired tremendously because I think it created a great deal of opposition, like I mentioned a statement by Chief Ben Christmas. And, you know, the challenge. And one thing I like to mention is, and I suggest to any Indigenous people around the world that are thinking of writing their histories, go into the archives and use the Europeans' records left behind. Against themselves, because they really, in minute detail, they left behind details of their crimes, and even, you know, such things as centralization. It was simply stated that the purpose of centralization was to get rid of the Indian problem in the Maritimes once and for all. And if you brought them all together, then it would hurry along the process. And the education system in the day schools that they set up, the modern day schools, they set up on Indian reserves in Shubenacadie, for instance, where one I attended, we were simply taught that we came from a savage culture, and it had no value whatsoever. And if that we wanted to succeed in life, we had to accept a white way, which was the right way. And it was, you know, totally degrading to go to these kind of schools. I'll talk about a little bit before centralization, and what got me on the road to being what I am was a degrading experience my mother experienced. And I was born in 1938, so I was around 4 years old. And my father was away working and never got home, so we had no food from Friday to Monday. And we went over to the agency on Monday, and my mother asked the Indian agent for some assistance, and we were there when the agency opened. And he said he'd think it over, and then about 11:45, that was around 8:30 in the morning when we got there, 11:45 we called her in and gave her a small ration. And I was sitting there and I was thinking, you know, she was crying, and hungry children home. There was 8 of us still home at that point in time, and nothing to eat for 3 days. So I looked at that agent, as young as I was, and said, when I grow up, no bastard like you is going to do that to me. And this is the kind of thing that pushed me on. And then I was working when I was around 18 in the hat factory, and this black lady, she called me over one day and she says, I want to have lunch with you. And she says, boy, you walk around here with your head kind of hung. She says, as if you think all these white people are better than you. She says, well, you're just as good as them and maybe better than a lot of them. And she says, what do you know about your history? And I said, no, I know very little about my history. And it was certainly not taught in school. When I went to school, all we were taught was our people could make baskets and axe handles. And that was about it. And she says, well, I suggest to you that you learn your history. And says you might wind up being proud. So I stayed in Boston until 1960, and then I decided that if I wanted to get ahead in life, I had to come home and get a better education. And I landed in Nova Scotia probably in June, I guess, back home. And I went to Success Business College in Truro and applied for admission there. And I was told that I would be accepted, and I needed funding. So I went out to see the Indian agent in Saqmawiey at the time, and he told me simply, why don't you get a pick and shovel and do what you're best suited for? And I had an aunt that had worked for Cyril Kennedy, who was the member of parliament for our area at the time. And I went and told Aunt Becky what was going on, so she got a hold of Cyril, and before the day was over, I had approval to go to Success Business College. Around 1985, I decided I was going to do something about the heroes that Caucasian society was honoring here in Nova Scotia, and the main aim of my desire to change things was Governor Edward Cornwallis. And like I say, it started in the 1980s, and I began to write newspaper columns in the mid-1990s for the Halifax Herald, and I talked about, the atrocities that were committed in scalp proclamations. And I put enough information together that and educated the public enough that slowly but surely, and there was, at that point in time, there were several buildings named after Edward Cornwallis, and the G8 summit, I believe it was around 1997 when that was held in Halifax, and they were going to have it in a building named Cornwallis Court. And I was happy as a pig, and you know what? I figured they'd be bringing in the world press, and I'd have a huge audience, worldwide audience, that would be able to point out, here's the leaders of the so-called free world meeting in a place named in honor of Aunty, a man who was advocating genocide, okay, but the common term. And 2 days before the meeting was to occur, I can't name the name because I haven't got it, but a very high source in Creighton government called me up and told me, Danny, I'm going to disappoint you. And he said, I said, what? He said, we decided to rename the building Summit Place. And then went on to working on the school, Cornwallis Junior High, and that got some friends on the school board, ours and all, and a few others that were like-minded, and they recommended that name of that school be changed to Halifax Junior High, I think it is, or something like that, Central Junior High. And the statue came down in 2018, and the park asked me to pick out a name for the park when they decided to rename it, and I recommended Peace and Friendship Park. And a Coast Guard ship, Cornwallis, Edward Cornwallis, the name has been changed, and that ship is now known as Copet Hobson 1752, in honor of the two men that negotiated the Treaty of 1752. So it's been an interesting ride, and I think I got most of that done. I look at my life, and I've never taken anything that never belonged to me, and I never earned, and I can have a shave in the morning, and I don't see somebody that I'm ashamed of. And if I change things in this world for the better, for some people or many people. I'm happy that I had a hand in doing it.
So you would like to put the word genocide on what happened to indigenous peoples in the Americas?
I have put the word genocide on it, and we were not the savages. I spell out all the criteria for it, and then I tell the reader, you will experience everything that's listed here as you read this book. The Mi'kmaq was starved to death right up until Confederation, and after that we lived in what would be called a near starvation existence, and that lasted right up until late 1940s, actually, before they improved food assistance and medical treatment and what have you. And then also include medical experimentation, for instance, that young children going in residential school with decayed teeth, and them permitting them to remain that way in order to find out how it would affect their health. Can you imagine having a rotten tooth? And I don't know if you've ever experienced a toothache. It can be excruciating, and nothing being done about it. It's terrifying. Can't change history. History transpired as it did. But if you use history as it actually transpired to teach the future generations, then you will prevent history repeating itself. And it will repeat itself if you don't.
Is that the message you'd like to impart to us?
Yes.
Because we are here both indigenous audiences and settler audiences, and we really want to hear from you.
I don't call them settler audiences, I call them invader audiences.
Invader audience.
No, really it's where I use the words, but when you use the term settlers, you're using a term that envisions peaceful interaction, which there wasn't. Okay.
Thank you. Because we talk about settler colonial genocide, but you'd probably say it was genocide.
It was.
Okay. Without any qualifications.
I did, and I argued that out in Saskatchewan with Murray Sinclair, and when he was heading up the reconciliation thing and having meetings, I was in Winnipeg, and I advocated cultural genocide be the term be used. And so we had a little discussion on that, and I noticed when the report came out, it was cultural genocide was included in it. So it was, when you're looking at one element of society trying to destroy another element of society, then what do you call it?
You call it genocide.
Yes. You can't change it. It's, again, thank the people at the conference for listening to me, and hope I've been helpful in them understanding how life should go on from this point on. And mine is coming to an end, which we all will sooner or later. I'm be 84 this year, and I think I've lived a life that I can look back on and say I did the best I could, and hopefully it mattered.
Well, I think Daniel Paul has given us a lot to think about, and we're going to continue the conversation, and I'd like to call up Elder Wendy Phillips, Elder Christina Salazar, and Aunty Zona Wilkinson up. So before we begin, I just want to acknowledge the land that we're on. We are on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Tongva and Kizh Nation peoples and their neighbors from north to south. So I'm just going to list them. The Shumach, the Tataviam, the Kuwatanemuk. I'm not pronouncing these. I've practiced a lot. Okay, the Serrano, the Kawia, the Payom Kawicham, the Awashaman, the Apaitipai, Kipat, Ipai Tipai, the Kumiai, and the Quechan, Kichan peoples, whose ancestors governed and cared for the land we now call Southern California. Indigenous stewardship or Aboriginal stewardship and rightful claims to these lands have never been voluntarily relinquished nor legally extinguished. We pay respects to the members and elders of these communities, past and present, who remain stewards, caretakers, and advocates of these lands, river systems, the waters, the plants, and the animals, and islands of the Santa Barbara's Channel. So we felt it was important to acknowledge the land that we're on. And also the conference is something that we're trying to do to acknowledge the history, but the genocidal history of this territory, but also the genocide that we've all experienced as Indigenous or Aboriginal peoples. So this portion of the night is supposed to be a conversational. I've already spoken to the elders on the panel. I've had the pleasure of speaking to them on the phone or getting to know them this evening. And what I've asked is for each one to introduce themselves and to talk about the community, the territory that they're from, the violence that has occurred, and some of the impacts. So we're gonna ask for about 15 minutes from each of the elders, and then we will open it up for discussion. Okay, does anybody want to begin?
You know what? I'll begin since this is my land.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, hopefully. Oh, there you can hear me. Hi, my name is Christina Salazar. I am Gabrieliño, generations back here on this land. So one thing that for me growing up is you learn a little bit of your history and you see what's going on. So before 1771, all around here were hundreds of tribes, all up and down California. The Gabrieliño territory was all the way up towards Sierra Madre, all the way towards San Fernando, all the way towards Palm Springs, all the way down Long Beach, get in a boat, go across the water, go to Catalina. So when I say Gabrieliño, we were not Gabrieliño until the Spanish came here. We were family tribes. We each had our different names of our tribes. If you look them up, you'll see all kinds of different names. We had different names for our cities. We would get together, but our chiefs were our family groups. We didn't have one huge chief to govern everybody. So a lot of our families would fight and get together, but that's the way it was here. So now, 1771, the Spanish come in, and they're building all these missions coming up, right? San Gabriel, which is where I'm from, is mission number 4. They actually started it down towards Whittier Narrows, and they liked that area there when they came up. The Indians, our native indigenous, we came out to greet them. right? You come and greet somebody new coming in. It's like, who are these people? Do we fight against them? Who are they? So when we're teaching history, we have that history of them greeting them, seeing the picture of Our Lady of Sorrows. They had a painting with them, which, you know, because the priests, this is just priests and a few soldiers that are coming up from San Diego. And they were in awe of this, you know, so okay. But now they need to build this mission. So the Spaniards, they now start gathering everybody up. You start gathering, because now you need to put all these people to work because you need to build a mission. So what happens? They take them off their land. They take them away from their family and said, come on, you got to come, because missions are coming up and they are, what is your first thing with a Catholic? You want to convert, you know, so you're converting your people coming in. So down in Whittier, that church failed 3 times because where they wanted to build it, guess what? The water came by and washed it out. And then they started building again. The Indians are like, you can't build there. The water's going to come. And they said, no, we'll build here. So it comes again. So they're like, okay, we can't build here. And this is why we have it now in San Gabriel. And they came up to this one area here in San Gabriel because it has a little bit of a rise. There's no huge water system by it. There are some creeks and some rivers going by it. And now they are building barracks for all these Native people to be housed as this mission is being built. These Indians do not want to be there and they run away. So guess what happens? They have to go and chase after them and bring them back. It's okay. And they're like, yep. So that is part of that history, you know, they're going back and forth. You know, the Indians don't want to be there. They're taking off their land. The Spanish are there. They're trying to build their missions. They're trying to convert people. They're trying to, we have some record of learning the language, right? And so now the Indians, one of them, Gabrieliño, she gathered up people and she said, we don't want to be enslaved anymore. And she had a revolt against them, and they tried to kill the priests and the soldiers there. Unfortunately, the revolt went wrong, and many natives were killed there. She was taken from the land here in San Gabriel, and she was taken all the way up, I believe it was Monterey, and then married off to have a family. So now she's taken away from her home. So these are things that are in our history that we read about, that we know of, because the Spanish write them. I love that, how he's talking about that. It is all written there. And we see these, and that's the thing too, is like, we think it's like happy-go-lucky, oh, they built the missions and everything, but they don't realize that they were kept there. They were kept there. And Eulalia Perez de Guillon, she was a keeper of the keys of the mission, and she would teach natives how to sew and cook and stuff. But one thing too, she was very upset that of the treatment of the natives, and she had said this in her oral history, how she was just appalled at the treatment, just so upset, you know, because she couldn't do anything about it. She's just there as a, you know, helping out to deliver babies, to teach people, to cook, you know, but she didn't have any authority to say, hey, you got to stop this, you know. So now, who comes in? The Spaniards are there. Now, Mexicans. The Mexicans take over, and natives are in that same situation again. They're thought of as slaves. They're thought of as working, you know, they can work the land for them. And now Mexicans are gone, and who else is here? The United States is coming. They're coming across. And they're coming across, and then all this land that is native land is being bought up because now the United States owns this land. You know, they're trying to do treaties and stuff, and you will see it with tribes that are away from Los Angeles, away from where everything is happening, you know, away from big cities. Like, so the Cahias, you know, down in Palm Springs, you know, Morongo, you know, they all have their tribes and their federal recognition. But here, we don't have a federal recognition. We have state recognition, but not federal recognition at all. Because what are they going to say? What are they going to give us back? You're going to give us back Malibu? You're going to give us back Long Beach? You know, there's nothing here. There's no land that's free. It's all taken up. It's all gone. What else? So now, one of the things that I found that very interesting too is because you think it's a happy-go-lucky, but then you start reading all these different things. So I worked also with the San Gabriel Historical Association, and I could see newspaper clippings and stuff like that. And one of the new newspapers said, and it breaks your heart, because it says, any Native, any Indian that walks into the city of Los Angeles can be immediately hung if he's not with his master. This is America. This is the United States of America, and that is happening in our city of Los Angeles. And I don't think anybody knows that, you know. It's just a little piece of paper, but that's the thing. We've got to get all that information out there for people to know. I was reading another article, and they talked about wanting to help the Indians, and by doing English and Native languages so that the Natives can better serve their masters. And that was a quote from that statement. They can better serve their masters. I'm thinking, it's like, God, you know, we're here. And you just come in and just like enslave everybody. So it's really sad. And I think that leaves a very heartbreaking, you know, it just makes me cry for our people. And I am very grateful to be here to let you know. And so now I'm going to turn this around. We help take care of the land. We have members of our tribe that go up into Azusa and clean everything up in there, because people go in there and they leave all their trash and graffiti and just trash the whole thing up in Azusa Canyons. And so we have members of our tribe that go up in there and clean up. And this is our way, which should be everybody's way. We should all be participating in this, taking care of the land. We had to hide because of all this, as you can see. You don't want to be known as Indian, so and everybody's coming in here. You have Americans here now, you have Spanish here, you have Mexicans here. So if you're Native and you're marrying in, you're going to say that you are Mexican. You're going to say that you're Spanish. You're not going to say that you're Native back then. Now, you know, it's because it's not that stigma of being hung or tortured or whatever is not on us anymore. We're more, you know, we can be proud of who we are now. We hide our language in our families, but now it's coming out more. We have different little songs. Different family members have songs that we're bringing out. And right now I feel it's a very big revitalization of our culture and our history. Our group also has some dancers, and we do performances. We do event at the Long Beach Aquarium of the Pacific, Mopatum, the Gathering of the Saltwater People. And we participate we have the Acorn Festival. And so we do things and try to preserve our culture and try to talk to people and let them know we are still here. And I thank you so much.
I'm just going to grab some water. Okay, perfect. There you go.
Thank you, sweetie.
Thank you. So I think I just want to thank you for sharing that history. I know that I came in January to do some work here, and it's true, a lot of the history we don't know about, even as Indigenous peoples. And so I am grateful for you to be here to talk about the people of this land that we're on. There's very few people in Los Angeles that I think know about the Tongva people, and I know it's painful to share our history, and the tears that we have are they come from a very deep place. But as Elder Christina said, it's the love for our land and our people, and the ability to share this history is part of the journey that we're on. It's sometimes difficult to talk about, but it's so important that we start doing that. So miigwech for that. And I'm just wanting to know if who wants to go next?
I'm fine with doing that.
Okay.
My name is Zona Wilkinson. I'm an Aboriginal elder from Australia. I come from 3 nations, the Gamilaroi, Wanarua, and Waka Waka, which is in the other state. Waka Waka being the mother, Wanarua and Gamilaroi being the father. I've sat here and I've listened, but first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the elders from this nation and that have come together. But I'd also like to acknowledge Barry Blacklock and Nathan for making it possible and caring about what happens and support for the elders in all country and to speak on their behalf. So I've been given to speak on their behalf, my elders, and I don't do this lightly. I ask before I do it. So it's all right to say I. It's not about I, it's about we as a people from every nation. And it's all right to say I am learning, but what are you learning? Are you learning the truth about what you're hearing, or are you listening? Or you just want to develop your own path without bringing in everybody into that and asking questions, travelling to country, paying respects, sleeping on the ground, going without food. How are young people doing that? Like the old people did, creating their own pathway, learning how to take care of the land. But what are they also doing about creating space for artefacts that have been dug up by everybody with their buildings and that? What are the young people doing about that? To create their own history and build space for that. We've got universities here. What are they doing about it? You know, every one of you has left behind something, or has been left behind a gift of artefacts that come from your nations. Where are they? You know, I could talk all night about this, but this is one of my things about knowing where you're walking, knowing whose land you're walking on. And if you haven't got the respect, knowing what the consequences are going to be, not only to you, but to your family. My mother just passed away, an Aboriginal woman, at 107-year-old. That was 2 years ago. She never saw her family from when she was taken at 2 years old. So, and no one can track. So who's responsible for that? The churches? Were they keeping the names? Were they keeping the names of the people? Or just renaming them and giving the identity that they want so they couldn't be traced? And this is digging, and everyone has to keep digging. Just don't let it, the young ones. Listen to your elders. Listen to your grandparents. If you think partying with the young ones, talking about your culture, do you know about it? What have you learnt before you went out? And I say this is what's got to happen. And it's got to happen all over the world. And we've got to start saying, it's time to stop. It's time to listen to the young ones. Because if you don't listen, you don't have a story to tell because it's not your story. It's your grandparents' story. It's your elder's story. You don't tell it because you haven't got permission. Unless you pay respect and use that and get permission to tell that story, you don't have a story. But I would like to just thank them for bringing us over here. And the respect that we've had since we've been here has been amazing at, the motel where we are. And just the respect from everybody. And we'd like to see you all in Australia. Thank you.
Well, bonjour. Megzi dodem, alwido kaza bajgot Indigenous cause, Wasauksing na dunji, giwaden zibi na dunjaba, Jaman makke Potawatomi dao. I'm of the Bald Eagle clan, and I'm originally from Wasauksing First Nation, which is, I guess on a good day, about 3 hours north of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And I live just northeast of Toronto in a town called Havelock. And so for myself, my Anishinaabe name translates to one who helps. So that's the Awido Causet. And our family name is one who stands alone. I'm of the Potawatomi Nation, which are the keepers of the fire, and Jamandamuk, which are people with excellent memories. Those are the two dialect families of what is known today as the Ojibwa Nation. A lot of people refer to us as Anishinaabe as well. That's an Ojibwa word, and it is describing human beings. So there's many teachings when we say Anishinaabe. And so for us, when we talk about our nation, that we're a fairly large nation. So this is, for us, we have lots of ancient knowledge that we carry as a family. And so my family carries the prophecies. We also carry ancient knowledge that we describe as the Thunderbird calendar. And this calendar, just by itself, is 500 million years of history. And so talking about our history. So for our family, we struggled, to keep this knowledge. Our family has hereditary chief titles on both sides of our family. And the sad thing with their stories is, you know, a lot of them were sadly taken out of, you know, what we call murder. And so our great grandpa was Chief Masabe. And our territory, how we look at our territory is you are responsible for about 200 to 250 kilometer radius. So our territory went as far south as Toronto, and then our northern community, which is present day Temagami or Bear Island. So for our people, we have lived along that area for thousands of years. Our elders, our chiefs were the first ones that made contact with explorers like Champlain. It was our chiefs that made first contact there. So the stories I have are from being passed on from generation to generation. So this is, you know, for myself, one of the hardest things to hear is when you hear the truth. And so on the death record of our, for us, our grandpa, that it said that his death was accidental. And so our mom and her sister and the elders wanted to have a private goodbye. And so the Indian agent had allowed it. And so they did their own investigation on the body, and they found bullet holes in the back of his head. And so they had told, you know, their aunt, like my aunt and my mom, you know, never forget, you know, the loss of our people. And even on their death certificate, that even though they knew it was murder, that it was sadly recorded otherwise. And so this is one of our, you know, for us in our family, one of the hard stories to talk about. And for us, in my mother's community, the chief that did sign the Huron-Robinson Treaty of 1850 was Chief Oshawa, and there was many chiefs that signed the Huron-Robinson Treaty, but they were one of the family groups that had agreed to sign for that particular territory. And so they had trained one of their last chiefs, and that was our uncle Isidore. And he was brought up traditionally, and he was trained as a hereditary chief. And sadly, he was beaten so badly, like they cracked open his skull. And so the sad thing was it affected his memory. And so as he grew older, you know, there was less and less knowledge that he could remember over time because of the damage to his brain. So it was sad because he only died 3 years ago. And so for us, you know, seeing that legacy of our hereditary system vanish, you know, because the sad thing is because of residential schools, you know, there was no encouragement for our traditional knowledge to be preserved. So a lot of the sad things that did occur, that a lot of our families had to go into hiding. So most of like my mother's generation had to do all their ceremonies in hiding. It was illegal, to do ceremonies anyhow. But the terrible thing was that our people were assimilated at that point, that it was most likely our own people that would then tell the Indian agents that, ceremonies or certain things were happening. And so you had to hide. And the terrible thing was you had to hide from your own people. So that was a lot of the history that, they had faced. And so my parents had the desire to ensure that their children would be raised with both. And so that was our responsibility growing up, was to not only learn Western education, but also our own. So I spent a lot of my upbringing with my uncle and then many other uncles, and they were all members of what we call the Medewan Society. And this was a secret society that was and is responsible to retain and preserve our history. So the stories that we know are from, how we've been taught. So one of our great uncles was a linguist for this lodge. And so he traveled in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And they estimated he knew 30 indigenous languages across the Americas. And he would be requested from many nations because of his expertise, that he could speak, he could write, and he could read in all these different languages. So for us, when we talk about our leadership, our governance, that they described a grand council, and this grand council comprised of North, Central, and South America. So those languages he knew were just not only from North America, they're also from Central America and South America. So when I talk about our history, it's one, it's long, but two, that we were organized in ways that, many people don't remember. And these are the things that, for myself, has been some of the hardest things to, make sure people continue to learn and understand. So some of the things I wanted to mention just in my closing is we have a lot of teachings on grief. And, for us, we talk about trauma. And there's different things that we can do, to take care of ourselves. And some of these things is, our smudges and why they are important. We talk about when there's grief, as soon as you hear it, the Chiba woman becomes covered. And to eliminate this energy that grief causes, that the smudge will help in eliminating this aspect of grief that we experience. So some of the symptoms that you may have when you experience, whether it's violence, abuse, trauma, an accident, that you will have a difficulty. So whether you forget things, you cannot focus, you may not be able to think coherently. You even for victims of sexual assault or rape, that in those types of events, that the mind will continue to repeat over and over and over again. And they talk about there's a feeling you have, and some victims will try and wash it off. And they'll keep on bathing and bathing and bathing, and they can't get rid of this feeling. And that's what we're describing, is that's the feeling that the Chiba woman holds on to. And in our teachings, that when you hold on to that type of energy, that you can continue to carry that. And we talk about our teachings on the mind, that that's how a poisoned mind gets developed. So we have many teachings on so many things, but those are some of the things I want to talk about, as to how to take care of yourself, to be well, and the importance of our smudges. That I know a lot of people are very worried about, viruses and bacteria today. In our research, when we smudge with our medicines like sage, that it will eliminate 94 of the contaminants on you and within the room immediately. And within 24 hours, it will be 100% of that room, that those contaminants will be eliminated. So this is about, for us, we talk about, ancient knowledge. And these were requirements as to when we would have gatherings, when we would do our ceremonies, that we would always smudge as soon as we would meet. And, this is what our medicines do for us. And this is some of our ancient knowledge that is just as important today. So I'll leave it at that and say miigwech for miigwech.
So we're going to open it up for more of a discussion, but I just want to say that as I was sitting here listening, we all come from such rich histories, so rich cultural teachings, background, language, connection to land. And I'm so grateful for the three elders that are up here that are able to share some of the history from our respective territories, telling our truth. As Elder Zona Wilkinson said, that we need to get permission to tell these histories, and that we need to know our own stories. We need to bring everybody together to be able to share that history, so that students, the younger generation, have the opportunity to know their truth and know their history. We have to create our own pathways, as was mentioned in this evening, to be able to share those stories and tell our history. We have to dig into archival records, but also dig into the stories that our elders have, to be able to tell our truth. But I think the strongest place that we stand on is that we are still here. As Elder Christina Salazar said, we're still here. And I'm so grateful that we're all here to be able to start this conversation, that I hope that this is just the beginning of more history, more of our own truth to be told. And the same chimigwech to the elders for sharing, for traveling a long distance to come here and to share the truth that they have. And I just want to open it up now for any questions or comments that the elders might have to each other. And I know pausing is good because we're thinking. Yeah, at the back.
Hi, are you going to have some support because the content is so, the content is going to be powerful for everyone, and I was a little bit concerned about how to make sure we're doing trauma-informed research, dissemination, so that we're not further harming anyone emotionally or psychologically or spiritually in our sharing. Are you ladies going to be there to help put us back together? Or should we be doing anything to make sure that we create a safe space of no harm, but yet the truth must be told?
No, I think that that's a very important question. We do need to look after each other during this conference because we are having tough conversations. And I think in the morning we'll be talking about that, but also I just want to make sure that when we leave the room, like, we'll look after the elders. We will be, I don't know if Dorita or Wolf, did you want to, or Martha?
They do come along and speak freely about anything they want to know.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they go away to what they think about it, and it doesn't come back to the table.
Yeah. Come back here.
Yeah, it doesn't come back to, their voice.
Yeah. Do you want to say something?
Look, I just look here and I see everyone is so quiet and so still. This is about speaking out. This is about talking to people. We're here. I mean, if you want to ask me something and I can't answer it, then, I need to go back home and I need to think about it. But when I go back home to think about it, you'll all be gone from here. So it's about asking the question now if you want to know anything. With here instead. Go ahead.
I do have a question for Ms. Salazar. I was curious to know, was your family forced to adopt the surname of the Spanish people who enslaved your people, much as African slaves were forced to adopt the surnames of their masters?
So that's one of the things where, you hear that? That's one of the things we're looking about in the church records, because that's where you'll find it. And that is one of the things that is taken away from us is our name. So you can see that those names have been changed to what they want to give you. But one thing that in the church records, it does list what city, tribe, they have the listings of those names in those church records of where that person was from. But we don't have the actual native language name of that person anymore. It's gone. So you would get, you see in the church records, yes, the names would be changed, and they'd be whoever they were working for. Yes. That answer your question? Okay. Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things about research, and you do find all these very interesting things, and you think you found something, and then you keep looking, and you find something else. And that's what's always interested me when I was younger. I have to tell this story, is, you know, I knew we were here for a long time. I knew we were native, but you don't have that name, you know? So then I start looking at the records, you know, and then some records you can find because they're in the Spanish records, right? Or then the census records. So you find it, you know, you find a mother, you find a grandmother, you find a grandfather, you find a great-grandfather, you find a great-great-great-great-great-great, you know, you can go back. But then, you know, then it stops at some point, you know. So I had started small, and I ended up covering the whole wall of my bedroom. So like right now, I think I have 400 to 500 names of ancestors. But I go too with aunts and uncles and children, you know, because I think that's important to know where you're from. And I know one of my other cousins, she's doing the same thing on another side of the family. And, you know, we all do these DNA tests and find out, oh, you know, what are you, you know? So it's important for us to find out where we are from, but it also, for us as natives, it can be erased.
Okay, thank you all for your sharing. It's really, really touching. I have so many questions, but I'll ask one for Wendy. And tell me if it's too secret to answer, but I was interested, you were talking about the Medeoan Society. And so I guess I have two questions about that. So first of all, do you think that colonizers, like the church, knew that it existed and targeted it specifically, or was it just like a broad attack on everything? And I'm just wondering if you can share, is there a process for like initiating young people back in, or identifying which people are born to take on the role of continuing those teachings?
Wow. I would say yes for it being targeted, even though they did attempt to make it a secret society, they knew it still existed. So this is, you know, for us at the same time, you know, this is the other thing is our elders also knew the prophecies. So they knew this time was coming. So this is the irony in it all, is they were also preparing. So because they knew. So this became like the sort of like the last attempt was the society to ensure that all knowledge would be protected. The terrible thing, in my mom's community is just north of Wasauksing, and so our mother's community, it was in the 1960s. The last elders of their Medewan lodge died in the 1960s. And in my father's community, so that's Wasauksing, they pretty much were able to function till about the 1990s. And that's when they sadly, you begin to see, you know, that generation leave. There has been like a major cultural revitalization, and and people have known there needs to be. And there's a tough argument right now as to should Western education be part of that. There's a lot of pressure in Canada because of the TRC, so that's the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, has really attempted to hold the education system accountable, like on all levels. So whether it's post-secondary or elementary, they've been really trying to pressure as to, teaching history and other things. But now the question is, for our traditional history, is that really appropriate? And so those things still haven't settled. I'm a traditional healer. Some of my frustrations, even today when my people call me, I usually have to do ceremonies like in the parking lot. I'm not allowed to be in the hospital. So it's really frustrating because I have to live out of my car. Like my office is my car. Most of the time when people call me, I'm calling from my car most of the time. So it's frustrating, so I've been fighting for a good 30 years in the education system to get us in the medical schools. And it's been a real difficult fight. We're lucky if we get one lecture that's on Indigenous history. And usually it's just statistics. That's it. You don't get anything else. So that's the reality we're facing. So as a traditional healer, it's been still difficult. Like we don't have the resources. We're not supported by any government program. So the medicines I carry, like they're rare and endangered. And one of the most difficult things now is climate change and urbanization. The places we used to be able to go pick, we can't pick anymore. So, and this is, I think, one of the hardest things today is the traditional people, like, sadly, they're leaving us. So it's a very harsh reality that we're in right now.
Hi, all my relations.
Mm-hmm.
I really thank the elders. I really thank you for sharing your knowledge to us and to me personally. I have a lot of questions to ask, but I'll try to keep it nice and short. So Wendy, any chance that, I know I can't say by numbers as far as the Canadian, the original people of Canada, by any chance, how many are there in Canada? Because I know the Blackfoot Nation is rooted, say, like in Alberta, between Alberta and the country next to Alberta, as well as North and South Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma. I know there's like a huge Blackfoot nation between Midwest America, the United States, and Alberta and so forth. Is there any chance? Is there any way that there's somewhat a relationship of your tribal nation as well as with the Blackfoot natives, because they happen to share the same region almost, not as close to Toronto, but like right in the middle of Canada. Is there any sort of history that was said about the Blackfoot tribe by any chance? If
Well, there's a lot of migration stories, and this is, you know, for us, we have thousands of years of migration stories, and this is something that you know, our people do not believe in the Bering Strait theory. So that's I think one of the hard things for a lot of Western educators to settle with. But our migration stories, for us, especially in North America, that we have our stories actually talk about the coming from the south, and then traveling through the eastern seaboards, and then some, like for our nation anyhow, coming up as well, the Mississippi, and then presently, you know, where we are today, that we have had many long disputes with not only the Lakota, but also the Six Nations, so the Haudenosaunee people. So this is, we talk about when nations came to the West, that these nations, some of them were responsible to take knowledge to save as much as we could. So we have stories of sending out different nations out west, and specifically to the mountains. And so there's, so like I said, there's many migration stories, and this is, like I said, because our people knew the prophecies and knew how hard like the last 400 years would be, that they did their best to make sure as much knowledge as they could to preserve it. And they asked nations to step forward. And, you know, a lot of families did come forward to help in that cause. So for us, there's, you know, when we talk about our nations in the West, you know, they were of great help. And, you know, and then I would also just like to end with, you know, we talk about how, you know, our people had many ways to communicate. And we talk about a totokum, and it's a bone with a string, and you pull it, and it reverberates, and it makes a very unique sound. But this is what our people talk about, how we use phones today. This was their original telephone, and this is how they were able to communicate over thousands of miles away. And so this is for us. We had our ways. Sadly, they're just not used today. So, thank you.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think we've got a couple more questions, and then I know everybody must be getting a bit tired, right? So we'll probably take 2 more questions, and then we'll all go home and rest for tomorrow.
Yeah, I think I'm one of those questions.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Just checking. Hi, I'm Keisha Talking Waters. I'm Rampo Lenape and Haudenosaunee, so I'm so sorry. It's all love though. My question though is for you, Zona, with regards to, you mentioned essentially what I would like to call nation to nation building and the power that is when Indigenous people come together. I was sharing before that I had the privilege of being in Aboriginal land in 2011, but I am curious, and I've never made it all of the way to what is now known as New Zealand, but what does nation to nation building look like from Australia to New Zealand, as well as I think about creation stories coming from that portion of the world, and yeah, what is that kind of relation?
You're talking about from Australia to New Zealand.
Like I'm similarly to how we're from similar territories, I guess. What does your nation?
So there's a lot of interconnection with marriage that are coming to Australia to marry. There's a lot of connection with sporting as well. As you all know, this brings people together, and look, love has no boundaries, darling, as they say. But what I'm saying to you is the sharing of culture. How do you share culture from 2 cultures when you have children? What side do those children take? And how do they learn? They learn from the mother until they're handed over to the men. Same as all cultures, I think. But how did you find it when you went there and you talked about it to them?
I brought a lot of wampum, which I will give you all tomorrow. It's a shell that for Eastern people, we originally made treaties out of. So I gave gifts. I come from a nation of giving gifts in terms of building friendships, but also ideally family. So when I was there, I brought wampum and I was given a boomerang and invited to a dinner. And
but you're a woman.
Yes.
You shouldn't have been given a boomerang.
I found that out later. I was also a teenager though at the time, so I'm not sure.
But this is what I said to you earlier. You need to ask questions from the elders. Don't just assume that you know everything. And they should have spoken to you about the cultural side of that as well. You know, in Australia, women don't touch didgeridoos. They don't get boomerangs given to them. So when you go there, or any of you travel, you need to question everything that goes on and what you're given. Don't just say, oh, that's great, they gave me this. Why? And what does it mean?
It wasn't an elder that gave me it. It was also another teenager.
You still question. You have to question everything you're given. You know, you don't go into hospital here and say, oh, I'll just have that. Don't you question what's happening to you? These cultural objects can work in the same way as you were saying, with the healing and the making you sick, and what you bring from that side of the world to here, to your own family. Do you agree with that? Mm-hmm. This is what we're just talking about. Mm-hmm. Do you understand what I'm saying, or?
I think so. I can't go back to 2011, and I definitely can't go back to Australia and give it back.
I know that, but listen, hop up. At least you understand. And this is what it's about. When I said you were young, didn't I? Well, you're still gorgeous and young. But just think about it. Ask the elders. Just because it's a young, hot Aboriginal guy giving it to you. All right.
I wanted to address you also. We talk about an elder. In my language, it's called kwahme, which means the one who has grown. So you are the keeper of the knowledge. You bring that. And I want to thank you for coming out here across the water to honor us. And I'm like you. In 2002, I went to Walgett with the Gamilaroi people. And for 3 days, your people took care of me. And they gave me boomerang. I'm a man.
You're a man.
I'm a man. I'm still a man, yeah. And the men took me and we talked and I got to meet two of the elders there who still spoke the language. And I remember there was a Jesuit missionary who was writing it down. And there was a young lady, her last name was Flick. She was teaching the language in the school.
Martha Flick.
Yes. She must have grown more since then. But the thing I wanted to ask was, well, what I seen was a lot of racism out there. White people towards the native people. I was warned not to go where a group of Gamilaroi people were in front of the post office. They said, watch out, they're mobbing. And I went and I introduced myself and I said, you know, I'm a native person from San Diego and I'm coming into your territory. And I would like to pay my respects to your elders. For 3 days, they took me all over, fed me the traditional foods and got to meet with the people. I gave them gifts too. And my question is, what is the state of the language and culture with your people right now?
From my personal opinion?
Yes.
As I said before, my mother passed away at 107. I don't always believe that the language that's being taught now is the right language because it was an oral history.
Mm-hmm.
So how was that written down by white men, church people, and that's not a derogatory, let me tell you. Nuns who bastardised our children, priests who raped and tortured our women, camps that were broken into and women were raped to breed half-caste children that were then ripped out from their boob, from their breast.
Mm-hmm.
How can they write a language? How can they document a language if they don't speak the language of the people there to begin with?
And in answer to that, that's what I told the priest that was writing the language, getting that from the two men. I said, you know, you're getting ready for a funeral. These two people are still alive. Why don't you do a language immersion program with these people so that they teach the younger ones? Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for visiting.
Well, we hope to see you over there. Back in Walgett, football season.
All right.
Hello. I have a question for any of you, all of you, whatever is appropriate. But this is a question that I have asked to many natives over the past decade or so, specifically elders. And I just love the answers that I get every single time. And I think that different answers, I don't know, always aid me more in my journey of indigeneity. But what would be your number one advice for young Indigenous people who did not grow up 100% with their culture because of, you know, family and land displacement, and of course lack of knowledge, or lack of language knowledge and such. Yeah, what is your advice for those who did not grow up as connected?
Can I just say, let me turn this on. It's on, yeah. This is one of the biggest problems all over the world. Australia has a massive problem with identity fraud, identity theft, which leads to universities taking that up with the stat dec side to say, yes, they're Aboriginal, where positions are taken up, where the real young people don't have that opportunity to go into that university because there's already fraudulent people there claiming to be for their own benefit. I mean, that's how I feel personally, and that's how it's happening all over Australia. And I think all over the world. I mean, you cannot go and get a DNA to say who you are. You know, people don't realise the only DNA you've got, or I think, is handed back to the elders to prove who you are. Now we've got, and if you've been removed, there are still records in this day and age. There wasn't back then. But if you know, young people like you, there are records. And these, you know, this doesn't only affect your identity, but if you've got a genetic disease, how would you know if you didn't trace that back? That is one of the most important things. What you're taking away with a genetic disease that you haven't bothered to look because you've just claimed something else, then you go on to have children, later on down the, you know, generations later, you're trying to backtrack it. Because we've not only lost identity, we've lost all the records of health, history, culture, and connection. Does that answer you from me? Anyone else?
Yeah, maybe a better way to pose the question would be like, maybe not ways of connecting back to like genetics and things that have, yeah, more like connecting to traditional ways of our people and elders, even when you don't grow up on the land that your family.
It's about paying respect and having a conversation and waiting till you're invited. And when that happens, you accept it graciously with respect, but not to document anything that's been said there unless you've been given permission.
And I'm going to add to that, as in our history, there was a species before us, and they talk about how advanced they were, that they could travel the solar system and they could travel the universe. And so their technology got so far advanced that they exterminated themselves off the planet. So our elders used to say, well, you better learn from that because we're close. So the one thing, the greatest lesson out of that was they forgot who they are and they forgot their spirituality. So that was the major message from, you know, learning from history and not to repeat it, is, you know, make sure you include your spirituality in everything you do. And, you know, and one thing that, you know, our dad used to say, is be proud. And don't you ever put your head down.
But also know whose footsteps you walk in.
Because we have everything. We know our history, you know, we know who we are. We know our language, and this is our land. It doesn't matter about deeds or treaties or whatever. Bottom line is this is our land, and we're still responsible for it. So we haven't lost nothing. It's your responsibility to pick it up. So that is part of our job, is to help you. So that's something, you know, is to have that courage to speak, you know, and to have that courage to move forward. You know, and that light, that fire comes within. And that's what needs to stay strong.
I think those are good lessons to end the evening on. I want to thank the elders for sharing their wisdom and their knowledge, the teachings. I feel like we have a lot of work to do, but very important work. And I look forward to the conversations that we're going to have over the next few days. And somebody asked about how we're going to look after each other as we have these difficult conversations. I think is important too. So please let us know if you need to talk, or let us know if you see anybody else having trouble. We want to make sure that everybody leaves here feeling lifted and not burdened. So Miigwech, thank you, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
She's right there. Oh, good. Oh, good. So, let's come downstairs. Okay.